more around some of the future plans for STP. Phil.
Thanks, Lee, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for attending our AGM. I'm just going to start. The new Future for Scotland's Towns, which was chaired by Professor Sparks, involved a lot of consultation. We already had good policy. The Town Centre Action Plan that was launched in 2014 had international recognition. A lot of countries across Europe and the globe had actually replicated the similar approach. And progress had been slow, steady, positive. We were starting to make gains. And then obviously COVID, the pandemic, landed. And that just gave us time to pause and reflect and think about rebuilding. So the group that Lee led was ambitious. It looked at what early actions had been positive. It looked at what barriers were still in place and where maybe we hadn't gained as much traction as we would have liked, and just tried to draw that together into a document, into a vision that would allow us to develop a sense of direction moving forward, and an encouragement and incentivization, and to tackle some of the bigger systemic problems, the persistent problems. Lee mentioned that COVID and climate emergency are key drivers behind everything that we're doing just now. And I think I'm looking at this optimistically. I think it's an opportunity to reset, to rebuild, to renew. And one of the key drivers in all of this is just the return to localism. We're seeing much more home working, agile working patterns. That reduces carbon footprint, which is critical. We're seeing that reconnection to local communities, to local green space, to local markets. Again, that's building in community cohesion and localism and sustainability to a much bigger level. So living well locally, that's literally what we're trying to achieve across all of the sort of sectors and partners and funds that we help deliver. For STP moving forward, certainly over the next year, our next steps will be to take the TCAP2 and to bring that around the country. Obviously, our next roadshow follows directly after this annual general meeting, the East Roadshow. We want to make sure that the new elected members and the existing officers across the country get a feel for what we're trying to achieve. So we're bringing in the Scottish Government policy people. We're showcasing the art of the possible using local examples, just to give those new elected officials confidence and inspiration in terms of the art of the possible. This can be done if we work together, if we build more collaboration, and we just have that more ambitious leadership. And just consider how important our town centres are in terms of the community, in terms of that social cohesion, but also the economy and the environment. We just need to nurture our town centres much more than we have done in the past. And I'm heartened by the sense of direction within the national planning framework, where towns have been embedded. And that was one of the key asks of the review group in terms of a new future. We need to see much more alignment, and towns need to be viewed as critical assets, as part of our national infrastructure. We are a nation of towns after all. The bulk of the population, the bulk of the business base are in the towns. So we really need to give them much more nurture. And not just in planning, but we need to speak to transport and to digital and to energy and to culture and to heritage, and to tourism. It's right across the piece, and underlining all of that, the living well locally piece about health and well-being, about social inclusion, about fairness, etc. So it is a time of opportunity. So the first stage in terms of STP's activity will be around that amplification and taking that message out across the country, to work with the Scottish Government, to work with causal and local government and all the key stakeholders to make sure that there's a broad awareness of what a new future for Scotland's towns can deliver. We're also going to be looking at an evidence-based approach. So we've already got a very useful tool online, which is the Understanding Scottish Places platform. And that again allows people to make much more grounded decisions based on evidence. So we're going to kick off a refresh of all of that this month, and hopefully we'll be able to launch a new product next year. So it'll give people, the confidence that they're making big decisions based on strong and firm evidence. Town centre living, we need to look at repopulating our town centres. We've got an ageing demographic. We've got a younger demographic who don't engage with the housing market the same way as people of my age. So we need to think about some of that redundant space that's within the town and city centres and turning that back into better residential solutions, which again is very much around the sustainability climate emergency agenda, but also about the health and well-being and also about the economy, because there's multiple benefits from bringing people to live back into the town centre. In the past, and certainly through the first phase of TCAP, some of these big persistent systemic problems were maybe just too big an ask for local government, who were already challenged in terms of, looking after old people, educating young people. So the Scottish Government have recognised that in terms of the Place-Based Investment Fund, there's an element of that has been set aside to do proof of concept. So we're looking at some demonstration projects. We heard in the cross-party group today, how do you fix a shopping centre that's no longer working, but it's the heart of the town, it's the most dominant feature within the town centre. And it was really inspiring to hear Ken Ford and Beyond Retail looking at how a mixture of leisure, hotel, housing and retail can all come together, knitted together with better civic realm, with open green space, places for people to meet and connect. So it does show you that these things can be done, and we will case study these and we'll share and amplify across the country as they're developed over the course of the coming year. But we'll be looking at digital towns, we'll be looking at climate action towns, all of the things that we know that has to happen. We will be working to try and push this a wee bit faster and a wee bit more aggressively, because as the climate emergency suggests, it is a bit of an emergency and we need to be working at pace. We will continue to work closely with the colleagues in Scottish Government around the fiscal measures, the big things, the VAT issues, the non-domestic rates, digital sales tax. So we will be doing what we can to help forward that agenda. Also, the cross-sector alignment, we're seeing much more alignment of policy and strategy. We need to make sure that continues and embeds, and make sure that town centres become the showcase of a lot of Scottish Government policy around community wealth building, town centre living, digital climate, active travel. So our role in all of that is just, again, to be that central go-to credible agency who can build the networks, make the connections, again, give confidence and inspiration to people on the ground. Scotland Loves Local, as Professor Sparks mentioned, has been a big achievement for us in a short period of time. And again, that goes back to the localism agenda. We had the fund, which allowed lots of localities to do things at a hyper-local level, whether that was virtual marketplaces, home delivery, community activity, helping businesses to trade online. So it has been a big achievement, lots of climate action activity within all of that. Moving forward with the local authorities Economic Recovery Fund, we're actively engaged to try and see, can we alleviate poverty, help with the cost of living crisis that's currently underway, and use the Scotland Loves Local gift card to actually target those groups in society who are less well off and need that wee bit of support. So we've seen Glasgow as a good example, who have invested over £9 million to look at supporting 86,500 households in the city who are the low income groups. And that will just give them that wee bit of a boost later in the summer, at a point in time whenever everybody's under financial pressure. So it shows you the sort of levers that STP has in terms of reaching into various agendas, helping local authorities, helping with the poverty agenda, looking at the sustainability activities. So we've got a busy year ahead of us. And finally, just in terms of the bids, Lee has pointed out, the bid movement in Scotland has emerged strongly from the pandemic. We've seen a lot of bids renew. The Scottish Government had built an additional piece into the legislation, the coronavirus legislation, to pause the renewals of bids because we didn't want people carrying out ballots in the pandemic. But then when we did put the bids back to renewal, they did come through successfully, and we have seen bids emerge, new bids emerge through the pandemic as well. So we've got our first island bid, and we've got our first community improvement district bid. And I think the community improvement district bid offers a lot of potential. This is a model that we would like to promote right across the country, where all of the sectors and stakeholders in a particular area start to work more collaboratively, and they develop a resource over the 5-year period of the bid to actually implement their business plans. So Postle Park, North Glasgow, that's our first community improvement district, and it's a very holistic grouping of the business community, large and small, local authority, underpinned by the social landlord, North Glasgow Homes, but bringing in different community groups. It's the home of the Black and ethnic minority population in Scotland. It's also the home of the Chinese population in Scotland. It's bringing all of these people together to see how can we collectively improve the place for the people that live here and the businesses that operate here. So I think there will be a lot of interest in how the Community Improvement District plays out. So that's really the areas of focus that STP will have for the coming year or so. Hopefully we will see sustained recovery. We just need to keep our eyes open, our ears to the ground, listen to the businesses and the communities intensely, because we are emerging from an exceptional period of time and into a climate emergency as well. So we just need to be on the front foot. But I think when we look at this optimistically, it's a time of opportunity. And that's the point I would like to make. If we work more collaboratively together, cross-sectorally, we've got a much better chance to rebuild and renew and build a better Scotland for everybody. Thanks. Back to the chair.
Thank you, Phil. And hopefully my sound might be a bit better now. Apologies for the quality of the broadband from the depths of central Edinburgh. I'm delighted to thank you very much, Phil, for those comments, and also before that, to Lee for the annual AGM meeting. We'll move on to part 2 of today's session, which looks in greater detail at the Town Centre Action Plan 2. And we'll look at the policy area through our guest next, and then after that we'll look at some of the practical implementations that are already in place in East Lothian, with some really exciting exemplars of what can be done to hear from. So first, we had planned to hear from the Minister, Tom Arthur, the Minister for Public Finance, Planning and Community Wealth. And so unfortunately, Mr Arthur has been asked to speak in Holyrood to respond to parliamentary business. So we're delighted to be joined by David Cowan, who is Head of the Regeneration Unit at the Scottish Government, to speak on Mr Arthur's behalf. David, thank you very much for stepping in, and over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And yeah, apologies from Mr Arthur that he's unable to be here, called away on parliamentary business, which does happen from time to time, understandably. So instead, you've got me. I'm coming off the bench, and to continue the analogy, I didn't get much of a warm up, so if I'm a bit rusty, please bear with me. And see if you can guess which bits of the speech I changed as well. But there you go. So I am pleased, though, to be attending another of Scotland's Towns Partnership's annual Towns Tea Parties, and to be able to speak on the Minister's behalf. It's a great opportunity, I think, to reflect on the success of towns, the length and breadth of the country. Last week, the Minister undertook a series of events in Galashiels, including the sort of a public launch, if you like, of our joint response with COSLA to the Town Centre review. He spent time at the Great Tapestry. He chatted with representatives from Energise Galashiels and some of the community participating in a range of transformational town and tapestry projects. I also spoke with a local housing association about their actions to implement a community wealth building model before meeting with academics and students at Heriot Watt University Textile and Design Campus to view their graduation show. Minister was really inspired by the visit and all that he saw, and reflected that the activities in Galashiels show what can be done when people, communities, local and national governments and other organisations, public and private, work together, build on existing local assets, tell the story of a place, and capture and harness the imagination and pride that people have in relation to their town centres. I accompanied the Minister, and it was great to see firsthand for the first time the new Galashiels Tapestry building, which is been a great thing to see coming out of the ground over a number of years, and really the impact that it's already having on Galashiels. But equally, just to meet some of the people as well as the Minister that were undertaking the work, and hearing about the work of Energise Galashiels and working closely with the council to really try and drive change and drive things forward there. So, and of course, that tapestry building provided an ideal setting to launch what we're imaginatively calling Town Centre Action Plan 2, which is our joint response with COSLA to the Town Centre review. The review, chaired by Professor Sparks, as you know, provided an opportunity to rethink and re-energise our efforts to develop towns and town centres that meet the diverse social, environmental and economic needs and aspirations of our communities. We strongly support the overarching aim expressed in the review to work with our communities to transform the future of our town centres, help us recover and learn from the impact of the pandemic, and realise the necessary economic, environmental and social well-being benefits. Towns and town centres are vital to the collective well-being of our society, economy and environment. They evoke a sense of community, place and identity. They are part of the solution to the big challenges facing us, and they provide an important contribution to a wide range of national ambitions where they come together at the local level. Our town centre first approach has been built on a strong partnership with COSLA and local government, and Kate Forbes, the Cabinet Secretary of Economy and Finance, made Cabinet colleagues aware of the Town Centre Action Plan recently, and our reaffirmation of the Town Centre First principle, which Cabinet noted and agreed. But it isn't for Scottish Government to do this alone. The future success of our town and town centres is for all of us. And that's why our response to the review includes a national call to action owned by all. That means that you and the organisations you represent will have a key role in supporting the places in which you're proud to live and work to help make them more vibrant and more sustainable. Building a stronger, fairer, greener Scotland must be underpinned by localism. Living well locally will help us cut journeys and carbon emissions, improve their health and well-being, protect jobs locally, and play a major part in achieving our community wealth building agenda. Both the review and our joint response highlighted the fact that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to transforming towns. They did, however, reinforce the point that we must put our town centres first, making them not just the places where we work and shop, but where we live and enjoy more of our leisure time. As we do, we need to incentivise entrepreneurialism and accelerate digitisation while tackling climate change. I hope each of you has carefully read the response, and I look forward to hearing what people have to say as part of the roadshow events being staged by Scotland's Towns Partnership and the Scottish Government. Much of the action needed to support our communities is, of course, needed now. And with that in mind, I've been pleased to see the continued success of the Scotland Loves Local campaign in encouraging people across the country to think, choose and spend locally. The Scottish Government's programme in support of Scotland Loves Local includes, as we've already heard, backing for the Scotland Loves Local card, which is great to see being used up and down the country. And I would encourage you to keep urging local businesses to sign up to the Scotland Loves Local card, and encouraging those who live around you to embrace it as a way of showing support for local businesses. Phil mentioned the decision by Glasgow City Council to use the Scotland Loves Local card to distribute £9 million of financial support to 86,000 households. And this shows the versatility and tremendous potential for the cards, not just to support businesses, but to support families in a direct and powerful way. And I'm hopeful that other authorities will follow suit. As we take a moment today to shine a spotlight on towns, I'm delighted to announce on behalf of the Minister the launch of the Scotland Loves Local Awards 2022. The awards will once again celebrate the people, places and organisations working tirelessly to make our home areas special. Categories include those recognising work to improve our spaces and the environment while celebrating innovation and a high street hero. Nominations open today, with more details available at www.lovelocal.scot, and I look forward to hearing the stories of our winners. And thank you.
Thanks for that, David, and apologies everyone. Peter, who was chairing the event, has been having some major broadband issues in Edinburgh city centre, so I'm going to be taking over the role of chair for the rest of the afternoon. So that was really helpful to hear from David, the Minister's ambitions in terms of the way forward. We're going to hear from Lee again. The main reason we're here in terms of the East and Lothian Roadshow is basically to amplify what TCAP2 is. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Lee back to talk through the main aspects of the Town Centre Action Plan 2 and what those ambitions are. So over to you, Lee.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I'm just slightly nervous in that David had to step in for the Minister. You had to step in for Peter. I'm pretty sure my time is numbered the way this is going. But anyhow, well, I'll introduce myself formally, and then I'll say what I want to try and do in the next few minutes, if I may. As you gathered, I'm Lee Sparks. I'm chair of Scotland's Towns Partnership, and I also chaired the review group that produced a new future for Scotland's town centres and I'm Professor of Retail Studies and Deputy Principal at the University of Stirling. And what I want to try and do is present just over a few minutes the context, the structure, and then what's in TCAP 2, not in the length of detail. There's a large amount of material in there, but the approach. And I'm going to stay at the national level, at a higher level, a policy level, because I think it's important then that when we look at the local level that we're going to see in the rest of the presentation this afternoon, we try and see how those fit together, that there's a framework, but it is the actions at the local level, at the town level, that really will make the difference in the end. And I'll try and explain that relationship a little better if I can. It's worthwhile reflecting on how we actually got here. It is just over a decade or so ago that the UK government asked Mary Portas, a retail expert, to do a review of high streets. And that wasn't the approach that was followed in Scotland. In Scotland, we had a national review of town centres. And I often start with that distinction because I think it's a really quite important distinction, that in England, the focus and the issue was a retail problem, and that towns were seen as a retail issue. In Scotland, towns were seen as a place issue. And through that, I think we've developed a distinctive approach, which has been really quite important. The National Review of Town Centres, the Fraser Review from 2013, led to the first Town Centre Action Plan, the agreements between Scottish Government and COSLA around Town Centre First and around the place principle, and also then eventually to the place-based investment programme. So over a period of 8 or 9 years, we've had a roadmap, which has actually, I think, held us in very good stead and has been looked at by other parts of the UK, really quite enviously in Wales, in Ireland, but also in England. And the High Streets Task Force in many ways is modelled around some of the things we've done, despite some of the foci that they actually still have. So we've always seen towns as unique, and we've always seen towns as having a place focus rather than purely a sector focus, albeit we have to understand the changes and demands in particular sectors. And that's really quite distinctive and different in Scotland, and really is still important. And that's been an ethos, I think, that we've carried through in the latest work. We have to reflect, though, that over that 8 or 9 years, the context changed. Climate emergency is one aspect of that. And whilst, as Phil said earlier, progress has taken place, big issues still remain. And many of those issues have been exacerbated by the pandemic and by the pace of change that's hit our town centres. Our towns show that economically and socially, and it's one of the reasons why, if we think about what we have to rebuild, it really is about community, and that has been a focus of successive governments, that the nature of community and what we need to do to build and support communities at a local level becomes much more important. So I was asked by the then Cabinet Secretary in 2020 to look at the Town Centre Action Plan, brought together a review group to do that and chaired that review group, and we published our report in February 2021. And that was a new future for Scotland's town centres. And we had 3 main areas, and it's worthwhile reiterating those again, I think. The first was to strengthen the policy and understanding. We have had good policy, but we can do an awful lot more. And I think town centres need that support, and I'll say a little bit more in a second. Secondly, to address some of the fiscal imbalances, whilst recognising that's a bit more of a bigger ask, and also some of those are within the UK government's remit rather than the Scottish government's remit. And then to focus on and actively support specific aspects or topics for town improvement, as we had done in the previous TCAP. We were also asked to come up with a vision for town centres. And the vision we came up with was towns and town centres are for the well-being of people, planet, and the economy. Towns are for everyone, and everyone has a role to play in making their own town and town centre successful. I've read that out and reiterated because I think we need to focus on a number of things around that. The focus on well-being, that towns are places that actually improve the economy and society and culturally the notion of what we are in terms of Scotland, that they are for everyone. They're not just separate. If you're a car owner or something else, they are for everyone. And that we all have something to do and all have something to say around our own town centres. And sometimes that's not been the case. It's worthwhile remembering, of course, that we've spent probably the best part of 50 years trying to destroy our town centres. So our review has both short and longer term aims and asks. And there is quite a mountain to climb in many of our town centres, more so in some places than other places. But we do have to recognise this isn't necessarily a short-term issue. It's not going to be fixed in a year or 12 months or whatever in short terms like that. It is going to be a longer-term aspect. Since the publication of the review, there's been a series of discussions, some run by STP through roadshows, some run by others. We've had various debates, various discussions throughout the sector, I think. Some positive about some of the things we suggested, some rather more negative. And now finally, Scottish Government and Council have produced their response in April of this year. And their agreed response, it might well have been earlier if we hadn't had Omicron and hadn't had some other things to put into place within government. But we've now got TCAP 2. And TCAP 2, the response by COSLA and Scottish Government is defiantly, I think, a call for action. And that's what David was trying to say. It's at all levels, all places, trying to do their best for their town centres and their towns with an enhanced enabling framework. Excuse me a second. As you may have gathered, I am suffering from COVID, so I'm struggling slightly. So all levels and places doing their best for their town centres and towns within that enhanced enabling national framework and looking at the place both socially, culturally and economically. And if you read the document, and I hope you have, then it's a different approach perhaps to some of the other government documents you might see. And it's an attempt to be much sharper, much more focused, much more action orientated as a consequence. And the framework that it sets out in TCAP 2 has 4 specific categories, which then deliver specific outcomes. And the 4 categories are to get the policy right, the right policy framework across Scotland, to deliver the right kind of support, and we've had discussions about the types of support that are required within the review group, to provide that framework which will form the basis for investment. And then finally, much more partnership working, both horizontally and vertically, so that we get alignment across all of the things that we're trying to do. And those 4 categories then deliver a set of outcomes. Now in total, there are about 50 somewhat outcomes in this. So I'm not going to read them all out, but if we think about them, they tie into things that we might have expected from the review. So enhanced planning, town centre first, a focus on God, apologies, taxation and fiscal levers. Town centre living, digital towns, enterprising communities and local economies. So focus on social enterprises, entrepreneurs, community roles and assets, cultural and local economies, climate action, demonstrator towns and measuring and evaluating progress. And weaving throughout that a set of more detailed outcomes that we want to look at in some of those. Now, the point I want to make is that some of those categories, outcomes and actions are national. National Planning Framework 4 would be a good example of that. Some of them are much more about how local government, local councils implement national frameworks and ambitions, whether that's for local decisions about planning, about transport, about specific aspects about climate or housing. They all require engagement, engagement from communities and parts of communities, social enterprises, entrepreneurs, residents, businesses at the local level. It's that localism that becomes really important, that link between the enabling framework and the local level. Some require new thinking, 20-minute neighbourhoods, and the applicability of that to parts of Scotland. Do they apply in certain parts? What does it mean? What are the principles and how do we take those principles forward? Community wealth building would be another illustration of that. Much of this requires vision, ambition and change. And that change would be business, would be citizen, would be organisational. For me, it's a really interesting time, and I think it should be a really radical time in the way that we look at some of these things. Now, that balance of national and local is really, really absolutely vital. It's why we're trying to structure what we've done today on some of these roadshows. We all love our towns and places, and we need to show that in the actions that we have. Stop doing harm in the way that we have been doing harm in many ways. And TCAP 2 is designed to help and enable and encourage that. But it does require work at the local level to make that operational on the local level. And David talked a bit about what we saw in Gala Shields. I'm hoping I'll hear very much similar from later the local stories from today as well. And I think that local bit is really quite important. I'm going to end with some words from TCAP 2, if I may, as a direct quote. The words on a page or bullet points in a plan or me presenting here set the scene. They don't deliver the outcomes we need on the ground. This is not one person's, one public body or one organization's responsibility. It's a shared endeavor, requires individuals in whatever role they have to take positive action. It also requires all of us, consumers, business owners, councillors, politicians, officials, and ministers, to reflect on and avoid actions and decisions which continue to damage and harm our town centres. There's a lot of things about the good stuff we can do in town centres and the good things we should be promoting. We also need to make sure we don't do the bad stuff, which is harming our town centres as well. We need that energy, we need that drive, we need that balance and partnership between the national framework and the local level. And I hope we're getting that right through what we've tried to do through TCAP 2 and what we're trying to encourage on the ground. Phil, I'll go away and have a lie down, I think, at this particular point. But I'll try and come back for questions later on, if I may.
No, thanks very much, Lee. A valiant effort in the midst of your COVID struggles, but very inspirational to hear from the chair of the review group. So thanks, Professor Sparks. And I personally would like to commend you for the piece of work, because it was a very ambitious vision for the country, and it just underlines the importance of our town. So thanks for giving us, and for David also for giving us the sort of policy backdrop and what we're trying to achieve with TCAP 2. So we're now moving into the second part of the session, which is very much focused on policy and practice, and we're going to be looking at East Lothian and some exemplars. I'm going to have the delight of introducing myself, first of all, to talk about digital towns and opportunities, and then we will move to specific East Lothian examples. So I'll try to be as brief as possible, and then I'll hand over to Kirsty McIntosh, who's Head of Partnerships at Scott Tech Army. Let's have a look at digital towns and the opportunities. Post-pandemic and the climate emergency landscape both point to much more use of digital technology. Digital for employment, we see much more agility and flexibility in the workforce, education, remote learning, skills, tourism, business, economy, and really importantly, community and social, being able to sort of communicate whenever we had lockdowns, and then realize the effectiveness and efficiency within digital communications for a whole range of uses. Going back to the first Town Centre Action Plan, digital was already seen to be a theme then. So in 2018, with the support of Scottish Government and Digital Scotland, Scotland's Towns Partnership delivered a digital towns pilot. We looked at 30 towns across the country, and we produced guidance. So there is on Scotland's Towns website best practice guidance to deliver on digital towns. More recently, we developed a best practice town centre Wi-Fi toolkit for the government, and we also have our first in the UK digital improvement district in Cooper. That aside, if you think of what happened with COVID and how businesses were able to pivot and to survive and to keep feeding us and to keep supporting us, mainly through support of Scottish Government, whether it was for business improvement districts or from the Scotland Loves Local or the Towns programme, there were a lot of funds that were issued very quickly by STP on behalf of Scottish Government. And what we've seen was some really good practice on the ground. I'll take St Andrews for an example. St Andrews, the businesses, there was a business improvement district in place, and they were able, through that sort of hyper-local knowledge and the existing collaboration that they had, they were able to move very quickly to create an online platform. So people across the East Nuke and within St Andrews were able to engage with businesses, and not just by creating a sort of localized Amazon, but also the delivery aspect of that was rationalized and consolidated. So we weren't having all the butchers and bakers and everybody, jumping into their cars after 6 o'clock at night to do home deliveries. That was consolidated where we had fleet organised by the Business Improvement District to do collective deliveries and to minimise the carbon footprint as well. So without the digital capabilities, that would have been very difficult. So we were quite happy to fund that on behalf of Scottish Government and to see the success that St Andrews online platform had. At the more local level, we've also seen the East Lothian gift card. That has been one of the most successful gift card programs across the country. And we're glad to know that we're working in partnership with East Lothian in terms of the Scotland Loves Local Town and City gift card and taking that to the next level. In terms of more strategic digital investment, it's very difficult to actually, even globally, certainly at the UK level, pick out a best example around what a digital town or smart town looks like. It's been very piecemeal in terms of people sort of know what they want to achieve, but they're not quite sure how to go about it. But North Lanarkshire Council, most recently, in partnership with Comms World, who are STP's digital partner, are investing £150 million in a fibre network, which will focus on social inclusion. So people who are living in the social landlords' properties will get access to high-speed broadband, which helps with employment and education opportunities, as well as the social side, learning. 20-minute neighbourhood hubs, creating that sort of digital infrastructure to allow people with the agile workforce requirement to be able to engage with that, but also delivering on the smart towns concept, the stuff that we've always known that technology could help our lives, stuff like traffic flow management, air quality, flood risk, footfall, real-time information, tourism information, that sort of thing. So it's good to see that, even though it's belatedly, we're starting to see towns lift that ambition. But certainly in the post-COVID and climate emergency landscape, digital has to play a much bigger role in terms of the new world, the new norm that we're facing. And the Scotland Loves Local digital currency, look at that as a new form of currency that actually secures that money within the local economy, which creates employment, it creates resilience, it creates a multiplier effect. And we have deliberately designed this using technology to make sure that the extractive online gems cannot benefit. So it just goes into local businesses in Scotland. They are the only people who can benefit from that. And yes, you can target it for people who have got reduced incomes or in poverty, but you can also use it to incentivize people to come back into work. You can incentivize people to use active travel or public transport. You can target specific groups like young people. So there is a real flexibility in how that digital currency can be deployed. So without further ado, digital towns, can I pass over to you, Kirsty, and you can give us a flavour of what Scott Tech Army are doing?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you very much, Phil, and thank you very much appreciate the invitation to present here today. I wasn't going to bore you to death with PowerPoint slides, so I'll just tell you a bit of a story about what we're doing, and if you want, I can show one of the sites if you want to have a look at it. The SOLE project, SOLE stands for Supporting Our Local Economy, was initially a COVID response initiative by the Scottish Tech Army, basically based on people submitting, project ideas saying, why can't I shop online locally the way I can at Amazon and Tesco? And we did quite a lot of research around how that might work. We approached it very much from a tech perspective. And last year we ran a pilot of it with the support of East Lothian Council in Dunbar. It was, if I say, and Joe Waddell is here on this call today, probably one of the toughest things I have ever done. And if I could say that the lessons that we have learned has completely transformed what SOLE actually is and does, and the way that we are approaching what we're doing now. At the end of 2021, we secured money from the UK Community Renewal Fund, which allowed us to actually resource this project properly for the first time. It gave us a marketing budget. It allowed us to do the one thing that we hadn't been able to do in Dunbar, which was to engage with somebody locally in each of the areas and have a community engagement specialist in each area, known to their communities, known by their communities, working with businesses and community organisations to explain what the SOLE project is all about. It is effectively a mobile app and a web platform that is designed to be a single point of discoverability for local people to find out about their local area. But in many ways, it's become much more than that, because one of our lessons that we learned last year is that these kind of sites don't work if all you have is a digital shopping centre or a directory. They have to be something more. Many people are now working either from home all the time or certainly hybrid working. And for the first time, maybe for a very long time, they're having to engage in their local town centres in a way they probably haven't had to before. So they don't know what they want from their local high streets because they don't know what's there. And that local high street is really challenged by an entirely new potential customer base that they don't really know what they want. And we believe Sol is a way to bring those two sides together so that we can use data to show people what's being searched for and what's available. One of the things that the platform does, or the mobile app does, is provide a facility to create what we call trails, which is designed to draw people out of their front doors and down into their local areas, into their communities, for more than just a reason than just to pop down the shops and buy a loaf of bread. Now, those trails could be, anything from heritage trails or history trails if you want, but actually, more creatively, you can have businesses working together to create a pamper day trail, if you like, that brings you out so that you can have a ladies who lunch day, or you can have a Halloween trail that brings people out and down into the town centres to find things. Every time we engage at the moment, we discover new things about areas, and the people that we talk to locally discover new things about their areas as well. And we believe that the Sol platform and the mobile app is a way for people to discover more about where they live that they didn't know before. It is trying to be many things. It will probably go through many iterations as we learn the lessons this year, but we had a soft launch at the weekend where we have a site effectively in this East Lothian, one for each of the local areas. So Musselburgh, Haddington, Tranent, Preston Seaton, Gosford, North Berwick and Dunbar. The idea there is to make sure that we keep it as hyper-local as we possibly can, with both community groups, businesses, news and events, and anything more that people can think of. And I have to say that over the course of the weekend, where we were actually present at some events over the weekend during Jubilee, the response has been really, really positive. People get an idea of what this can be. They're getting a smell of the sense of the possible, and actually coming to us with ideas about how they might be able to use it. And I say that, but from the perspective of businesses and community groups, but also from individuals coming up and talking to our community engagement personnel and asking if it could be used in this context or that context. It's got a long way to go. But in terms of technology, the technology is just technology and it works. And I suppose one of the things that I would really like to reiterate here at this AGM is that technology works best when it works at scale. So if this is something that can work for East Lothian and we can demonstrate that, we want to be able to promote that in other areas of Scotland. And the more communities that are using a similar platform, the more powerful it becomes, the more sustainable it becomes, and the more affordable it becomes for more communities. And that is definitely one of the things that we want to be able to demonstrate in East Lothian. There are plenty of opportunities within the platform for each of those communities to show their own personalities, but behind it is, a powerful technology engine which will effectively, an improvement that's made by suggestions received from one community has an impact on other communities as well, and they benefit from those improvements too. It's a fairly well-known sort of example of technology being deployed at scale. I don't know if there's anything more that I can add to that other than to say we've only just embarked on this project this year in terms of rolling it out across East Lothian. It'll be accompanied from the 13th of June by a really quite significant marketing campaign. And that's the other side of this is like all technological platforms, you have to keep it front and centre of people's attention. And it requires that level of support and investment so that the communities can keep these platforms in front of people and encouraging them to use them on a regular basis. Thank you.
That's great, Kirsten. If you don't mind, could just briefly, could you just give people a bit of an overview of the Scott Tech Army? Because a lot of people will be unfamiliar. So,
yes,
who
of
are
course.
you? Where did you come from?
Who are you and where did you come from? Yes, and how did you get here? Yes, I'm sorry. The Scottish Tech Army is a not-for-profit organisation that started during the first lockdown on the 28th of April 2020. It was really to bring out of contract or furloughed or unemployed tech professionals who were sitting at home doing nothing and wanting to help, to work with third sector organisations who were having to switch to a digital presence at a time when they couldn't have a physical presence with the very people who needed them. It started very, very quickly. It really exploded onto the scene. I mean, we had about 150 volunteers, I think, in our first 24 hours. But we also had 35 project requests in those 24 hours as well, of organisations desperate for help. Fast forward 2 years, we now have more than 2,000 registered volunteers, not all of them active, of course, but we continue to do the work that we do through the Scottish Tech Army. And at this year's Tech for Good Summit, on our second birthday on the 28th of April, we launched a UK-wide initiative called the Tech for Good Alliance, which is an opportunity to bring the entire tech sector together to work at scale with third sector organisations also at scale, to sort of try and hit some of these really big rocks that we think technology may be able to at least provide part of the solution to. So I'm very interested to talk to anybody who'd like to know a little bit more about that, because many of the problems that we face as a nation, we believe technology has a role to play there, and we would like to show the tech sector working collaboratively can possibly move some unmovable objects and helping to deliver some solutions there. Thank you.
And that's really appreciated, Kirsty, and thanks for that. So we've got a bit of backdrop on digital and the art of the possible around technology, etc. And I think what's happening in East Lothian is really exciting, being driven by the Scott Tech Army and all of that, the body of specialism that you've got at your hand. We're now going to take a different theme within East Lothian. So people, planet, place. We're going to hear now from Joe McNamara, who's the chair of Sustaining Dunbar for Thriving People and Flourishing Nature. Over to you, Joe.
Right, thank you very much, Phil. Well, I've never done a PowerPoint presentation on Zoom before, so I hope this works. And just to say, Elaine, are we going to have slides up all the time? Or it's kind of little bits of you can see my enthusiasm for sort of like life in Dunbar. Well, let's kind of take this away and see how it goes. Just to kind of give you a little bit of the kind of context background. Welcome to sunny Dunny. It's not so sunny today, but the people here are still smiling. You'll find Dunbar, we've got to the north of us, we've got the mouth of the Forth Estuary, to the south of us, the Lammermuir Hills, and Edinburgh 30 miles away up the road. Over the past 20 years, I would say that the population of Dunbar and the little villages that surround us has fairly well doubled. So our population is kind of now about 16,000. So we are a microcosm. And when I arrived in Dunbar in 1997 to take up a job as a community development worker, it was just at a point where the kind of traditional industries had kind of gone into quite serious decline. Farming, fishing, really only providing a tiny part of the kind of economy and kind of job opportunities in the area. Until the 70s, Dunbar had been a popular holiday resort, Dunbar the A1 resort, but those glory days were past as well. And the influx of people and money to the local economy that had come with the building of Torness nuclear power station, which was 8 years in the kind of through the 80s, that was gone as well. However, next slide please, Elaine. Dunbar still has a strong sense of community. And when I arrived here, there were about 120 groups listed in our paper directory in the library, community pages. So things are a bit of an upgrade now from Kirsty and the Tech Army, and anything that helps us to communicate cannot but be a good thing. But this kind of directory was a kind of a directory of self-sufficiency, and all the groups and organizations, all the energy that people in the town were kind of putting out to keep the community together. The image here is of the Christmas lights, and I think Dunbar's Christmas lights are famous, and this is due to the kind of endless energy and commitment of the people who make this possible. And when they're not putting up the Christmas lights, they go out and they paint the houses on the high street as well. These guys are really local heroes. And then one of the other highlights of our calendar is Lifeboat Day, another kind of strong aspect of Dunbar's identity, the fishing and lifeboats. And so that kind of brings people together for an annual event. So at the beginning of the noughties, it was the start of a process of development, more houses being built, new people and energy coming into the town, and that was a good thing. The health visitors were kind of reeling under the impact of 150 babies being born in 1 year. So next slide, please, Elaine. We still manage to have a thriving high street. There are ups and downs, but the high street keeps going. And I think there are many things about this that are interesting. So at the beginning of the noughties there in 2003, John Muir, Dunbar's most famous son, I guess, a new museum was opened to kind of celebrate and tell people about his life and his ethos. And in 7 years, that visitor centre had kind of attracted 100,000 visitors. The new population to the town required new facilities, sports and leisure centres, a new community centre, new primary school built to accommodate all the children, the influx of people and children. And it was interesting when the council proposed building 2 separate primary schools that the community said, no, wait a minute, we think that we want the children all to go to school together. And so the primary schools were built around age groups, but all the children went to one and then moved on to the other. And I think this has been an interesting thing in kind of creating community cohesion. In addition to the facilities being built around in the town, there was also new developments of kind of retail centres on the edge of town, which was a source of kind of both kind of excitement and anxiety for people on the high street, and people worried that this would have a very negative impact on the high street. However, the high street has survived and thrived. That's one interesting point here to say was that back in the day, when the multiples approached the town wanting to, John Menzies and chain stores wanted to take up facilities on the high street, and the local trades association were blamed for not letting them in. I don't think that was exactly the case, but maybe in a way that was not a bad thing, because it's meant that the high street is very much local. It's local shops run by local people. I think they're all local heroes, and these people have a commitment to the town and the social life of the town as well. So the development has continued apace, and I think over the past sort of 10 years and in the local plans, 3,000 houses will have been built by the time the next plan gets to completion. And so the first phase is the physical integration and social integration, I think, has been successful. But now that the new houses are being built further and further away from the high street and the centre of town, we wonder if that process is going to continue in the same way. I think it won't be. There is now, plans to extend the retail development on the edge of town, and I think that will perhaps make the new population. It's more of a dormitory town rather than a community that people have all sorts of reasons and requirements to kind of integrate into. But I'm not being doomy and gloomy, because I think that Dunbar, we've kind of survived and thrived. And yeah, I'll now move on to telling you about sustaining Dunbar, and I think the kind of role that we what we do. Perhaps there is a role that we play. It's not always easy to know the impact that you make. But in 2007-2008, Philip Revel, who's a kind of a local ceramicist and community activist, who's a passionate man, passionate about the environment and very visionary. He put a call out to people who would be interested in the environment and the community, and the call was answered, and over a period of time, enthusiasm built up amongst people who were interested in how they could change their lifestyle and improve the quality of life in the community. And so very soon we became registered as a community development trust and joined the Transition Towns movement. And so since that point in time, we've developed and delivered a number of projects that are built up around themes that focus on the local economy, transport, energy, resource use, and promoting health and well-being in our community. And the work that we do is very much based on community development approaches. We want to work with people and not do things to them, so that we see that they're active participants and not passive recipients of our bright ideas. We do have ideas, but we take them out to people, and our process is very much based on community engagement, finding out, sort of like checking out these ideas and not coming with something that's already prepared and saying, this is something you would like, wouldn't you? That may not be the case. So we want people to tell us, absolutely, be right between the eyes on that one. So we have a holistic approach to developing what we see as being about kind of resilient community. And underpinning, of course, this is the theme of the environment and environmental sustainability. But our approach is to take an approach of being positive. We're not kind of deficit and kind of focused on necessarily just on kind of problems, but we want to kind of work through building relationships and networks across the community. And so this is the kind of basis of our kind of a participation strategy. We want to enhance the local environment, and so that's both the kind of the built environment, social environment, and the natural environment as well. We want to create meaningful local employment. Hence we've developed some kind of practical projects and responses to that. And essentially we want to build a more equal, caring community, so where people can live their lives being respected and with a sense of dignity. So I think environmentalists are kind of often kind of considered as catastrophists. Oh, you're one of those, those know-it-all greenies, aren't you? And people kind of sense that we want to make them feel bad about how they're living their lives. And this is absolutely not the case, though it may be kind of sometimes quite difficult to kind of dispel this sense that, or perception that there is there. So what we're very much about doing is kind of working with people to develop positive choices, in response to kind of needs that have been identified, and then sort of like building up with sort of like options that can mean that people can kind of change what they do. And we kind of know that there is a positive desire to change. People know that the ways that we're doing things, it's not the only way, and that there are other ways of doing it. So we want to kind of harness that kind of desire for change, and to be creative about how we approach that as well, because there is massive amounts of kind of untapped creativity out there in the community. So that's a sense of kind of our process and how we approach things. And so what we're doing is to kind of find that sort of sweet spot, that overlap between acknowledged need and how, in responding to that need, we can bring about some environmental benefit as well. So we have a sense of what is needed, but what's needed and how you can actually realize that is, yes, here we come to the sort of funding issue. And we were lucky in the kind of first few years after we set up to be able to successfully bid for and acquire climate challenge funding. And so with this money, we set up a load of initiatives that were based around home energy, new ways of kind of improving local transport, how people could walk and use better routes across the community, a car club promoting cycling. I think we now have probably more children cycle to school than any other town in Scotland. That's largely to do because things about Dunbar, but cycle they do in vast numbers. We wanted to kind of create safe routes across the town. We set up food recycling projects before the council was doing food recycling. We worked with schools, we set up community events and celebrations. So we were really kind of busy out there. We also were very diligent about consultation, and we consulted with the community over a kind of a wide range of issues to sort of tease out needs, attitudes, perceptions that people have. That's all important in kind of working out how you're going to move forward. And so kind of synthesizing all this information, we began to develop practical initiatives, so around potential areas for development. And so from this action research, we developed an action plan. But when you're seeding ideas, you need to plant them in fertile ground. And so we had some of the kind of elements there. But I think kind of continuity of funding is always an issue for people working at kind of at any level, but particularly at local level. And sometimes it feels like you're kind of playing, it's a game of snakes and ladders. So, you know, that's what we do. That's what we do. We kind of work through it and round it. So we have to move on and do what you can. So one of the first projects, next slide please, was kind of precipitated by the closure of one of the town's last family bakers. The last bakery closed, and we saw this as an opportunity to realize a lot of our kind of, and demonstrate a lot of our kind of ideas about supporting the local economy, about sustaining the high street, creating jobs and training, and setting this up as a community business, which is something I've kind of long been an advocate of as a community training as a community educator. I wrote my dissertation in 1981 about community business. So it seems like a no-brainer about how you regenerate communities by giving people control over their local economy. But careful what you wish for. However, we went through the process of research and funding and consultation and working out how we were going to deliver this bakery. We set up as an industrial and providence society and raised funds. We now have over 1,000 shareholders. We've always been run by a committee. This is sometimes quite a difficult thing to kind of work with. You may have people who are enthusiastic and experienced, but not necessarily with direct experience of running a business. So this was a kind of a rude awakening for our kind of fond imaginings. However, over time, we've made sure that we've got the product right. So, you know, donuts and pies, not exquisite French patisserie. Our sourdough bread always hits the spot. Getting the right people it's not something that's always within your gift. You work with the people that you have, but when you find the right people, you really know the difference that makes. We've always wanted to support young people into business, but often they're fragile, they're vulnerable. That generates a lot of human resource issues that have to be contended with. You may not always be experiencing the cash flow that you require. We've had patient lenders and much goodwill from the community, and that has enabled us to survive over the piece. Next slide, please, Kirsty. We hit a low spot, but then we managed to hit a high spot, largely due to finding our master baker and his wonderful wife, who was the manager of the business. But we won a Plunkett Award. The Plunkett Foundation supports community businesses, and in 1918 we won the award for the most improved community business. So now we're going from strength to strength. Although it is a roller coaster ride. It absolutely is. There's never a dull moment. But now we're looking at an asset transfer request to the Scottish Land Fund, and hopefully that will give us a little financial comfort if we don't have to pay £8,000 to £10,000 a year on rent, and that will give us a little financial security in these very uncertain times. However, that was a project that was set up, initiated by Sustaining Dunbar, and then you know, has now become standalone. We still have contact and support when required, but you know, that is now a kind of a standalone business in the community, and that's how we kind of want to see things happening. One of our other success stories is Zero Waste. Another successful startup where we worked with a local entrepreneur to research and develop a plan to set up a reuse project. So that now successfully diverts 60 to 90 tons of materials from landfill. Successful relationship built up with the local authority, a strong partnership there. So the project has a facility at the local amenity site to divert materials and things that people think could be recycled, and those are kind of now sold through a shop in the centre of town. They've created half a dozen jobs and set out to promote other social enterprises. Massive amount of volunteering goes on there, and another one of their aims is through alleviation of poverty. Next slide, please. It's better than Aladdin's cave, because there's always free stuff for people to take up, and Zero Waste makes things available to other local projects and charities for free, so that's always a good thing. They get no external funding, and all their costs are met from their trading income. So that's a wonderful success story. Moving on now to the Belhaven Community Garden, which is a really important project in our kind of portfolio. In the beginning, in 2014, it was a patch of land that we had just been given a 5-year lease from the NHS to use the grounds surrounding the Belhaven Hospital. I think it's all right with this project. Pictures
Joe, could I intervene just for a second? You've been on for 20 minutes. Could you just sort of make your final points, because we do have another speaker to follow. Just make your final points, if you could wrap it up quickly, because we have another speaker before we close the event.
Okay, sorry. Well, Belhaven Community Garden is a kind of been transformed in 8 years from a patch of unused ground to a vibrant community space that's used for all manner of local events. 30 volunteers that are kind of working to produce half a ton of fruit and vegetables that are sold in local shops. This achievement was kind of recognized by some local school children who recently presented us with a cheque for £3,000 as a local philanthropy initiative. They recognise the benefits that the Belhaven Garden is making for the community. So where do we go from here? Well, we're looking at sort of like how we can develop projects that will focus on food and land use and food production and energy use. We're setting up an energy company that hopefully will develop a local energy project, a solar farm. So we have plans, we have energy, we have enthusiasm, we have vision. It's not always easy, but we are getting there. Sorry to go on.
No, thanks very much, Joe. And yes, sustaining a bar is a national exemplar on so many levels, and it does provide a lot of inspiration for others. So without further delay, I'm going to introduce Emma Bugle, the last of our speakers today. Emma is the manager of the East Lothian Food and Drink Bid, the first of its kind in the UK. So Emma, over to you.
Thanks, Phil, and thank you for inviting me along today. I appreciate that. So just to give you a brief synopsis really of what East Lothian Food and Drink are, we became a member of the bid in 2016, and we have just renewed again last year in 2021. We currently have 44 members, and they include what you call statutory members, as well as voluntary members. I also am a member myself and have been since 2018, because I co-own a East Lothian gin company called Fidra Gin. So it's really good that I've had that sort of knowledge of the bid before actually becoming their manager in October 2021. So what we basically do is we look after, and as Phil said, we are unique in the fact that we are the only sort of food and drink bid. We aren't a high street, so we run completely differently to the rest of the bids. But that's not to say we don't all have the same, ethos and ideas behind it. We run with our members. We aim to be collaborative with sales and marketing, working together with the larger companies that they can sort of mentor the smaller companies with regards to things like packaging. If someone's ordering a lot of cardboard boxes, they'll help out a smaller company to cut costs, etc., etc. We've got a lot of membership benefits. We do a lot of training. We've got some first aid training coming up. We have social media training, whatever the members need. We're always in communication with them, and we try and facilitate them as much as we can, because obviously they're the ones that keep our business afloat, along with obviously all the funding that we get as well. Yeah, so that's basically East Lothian Food and Drink in a nutshell. Yeah, I think what we're trying to do is all work together to become number one in the county, or the number one county for food and drink within Scotland. So that's what we're working to. And obviously, without funding from the bids, we had some help over COVID as well, which we're very grateful for. That obviously, as I said, keeps us up and running. So I'll leave it at that. We can answer questions and answers, obviously, if anyone's got anything to ask me in the section. So again, Bill, thank you very much for having me today.
No, that's great, Emma. Thanks so much. And yes, I love the innovation around the East Lothian Food and Drink bid, and it's a great example around supporting local growers and local producers. And again, it all links into that localism and living well locally and building resilience into our food security, etc. So thanks very much. Now, I'm conscious of time, everyone. We did have a Q&A planned, but we're not going to do that today. If you've got any pressing questions, if you could just direct them to STP, either Elaine or Alison at Scotland's Towns, and we'll get back to you. We'll also be issuing everybody with a copy of today's, a recording of today's event. I'm just going to wrap up then. Basically, it's been a challenging year. It's been a couple of challenging years, but it's also been a productive one. I think STP's role in supporting recovery is as critical as ever. I just want to take the opportunity to thank the Minister, i.e. David, Professor Sparks, coming from his COVID sickbed to give us that inspiration around TCAP2, all of our speakers, Kirsty, Joe, Emma, our guests, and importantly, all of our delegates who have come along and listened today. We've got a plan, a new future for Scotland's towns. Our thinking has genuinely improved over the last number of years. The resources are in place, so the opportunity is now. So thanks everybody again for joining us today, and we will get a recording to you of the event. Any questions, either to Alison, myself, or Elaine at Scotland's Towns. So thanks very much for your time today, and good afternoon.